Salutations and welcome, horse racing fans. I'm Matthew DeSantis, and this is the Win Place Show, a podcast devoted to all aspects of horse racing and handicapping that is proudly part of the Amalfi Media Network. Today, we're going to take a break from covering the big tracks like Keeneland and Santa Anita and focus on a local track having a huge Saturday, and that is Laurel Park, right up the road from me in Maryland. That is hosting this Saturday's Maryland Million Day, which features all stakes races, including the Maryland Million Classic and the Maryland Million Ladies Stakes. And to top it all off, I'm going to be joined by a guest handicapper, Barry Spears. You might know him as the Sniper on social media, and he also is the co-host of the Going in Circles podcast. Now, before we break it all down, just a quick reminder to follow, download, rate, review, and share the Win Play Show on the podcast platform of your choice. I'll have a podcast-only episode on Monday where I recap the weekend and go over what I got right, what I got wrong, and provide some lessons learned as well as news that breaks regarding the Breeders' Cup. Now, remember, we have a lot of horse racing content for any preferred consumption platform. If you enjoy listening, well, listen, we got you covered on the podcast, obviously. If you enjoy watching videos, we have the Win Play Show YouTube channel, which you can find a link to in the episode notes. And then if you prefer reading and not listening to my voice at all, well, that's okay, because we also have blog picks that correspond with each of these episodes where I give you my picks for the entire card. And the best place to get all of this information is to head over to amalfimedia.com or to follow me on Twitter at the handle @FailedToMenace. Remember, those blogs are also a great way to get your stables ready for stable duel contests as I give you all the fantasy stable prices next to my picks. And while this week's previews focus on Laurel Park, if you follow me on Twitter at FailedToMenace, I tend to also post short preview videos for other tracks and give stable duel advice. Finally, make sure to interact with us on Twitter or on YouTube to let us know how you think the races are going to break down this weekend and share with your fellow horse racing fanatics on social media. Okay, well, let's dive into some handicapping with our guest, Barry Spears. Barry, thank you so much for really appreciate you joining me on the Win Play Show podcast. As I mentioned in my introduction, you have the podcast Going in Circles, but let the folks know a little bit more about where they can find you on social media and a little bit more about the podcast and where they can find that as well.
Yeah, I'm always on the social media, especially Twitter. My handle is @UrbanHandicapper. It's URBN Handicapper. I'm usually there all the time. There's rarely a moment I miss. I don't sleep very much, so I'm always on there, kind of perusing and trying to find some cool stuff to look at. But racing wise, and my podcast, I'm with Chuck Simon. We just started a podcast. I think about 2 years ago, the Going in Circles podcast. We kind of want to keep it on subject matter related to the industry, other than picks and doing like handicapping and doing that. We do a little more than just that, although we will do some handicapping and things every now and then, especially for Breeders' Cup, big events, things like that. But Chuck's a great guy, former trainer. He's very well respected in the business, and he's taught me a lot since we started doing this, and vice versa, because I like to bet, and I do a lot with betting theory, things like that, and discussion. So putting those two things together, it was a great mix, and found it's been successful so far, so it's a good thing.
Yeah, that's great. That's really great, and I think it's so great to get people's perspectives from different worlds like that. Somebody from the horse racing industry, somebody more from the handicapping side. That's really helpful. So, well, speaking of handicapping, today is obviously this Saturday is going to be a huge day at Laurel Park. This is probably their biggest day, the Maryland Million. And I'm just curious, because I'm sure a lot of the people listening or a lot of the people going to the track on Saturday, they may not go to the track very often, or even if they're handicappers, they may not handicap Laurel very often. So I'm just curious if you have some general advice that, kind of travels from track to track with you, that is pretty universal, that you could give some listeners who may be approaching this for the first time and just kind of go out to the track once a year sort of a thing.
One thing that, I'll give are two different things, one for dirt racing, one for turf racing. So
Mhm.
for dirt racing, speed ends up doing well. So if you can find horses that are forwardly placed up close to the lead, they usually have a really good chance of not getting into any traffic, trying to weave through horses late, especially in bigger fields. And then on turf races, you want to hit the horses or kind of point towards the horses with late speed. Horses that run faster later are usually the way to go on the turf.
Yeah. No, great advice. Great advice. And I always tell people to, it's as much homework as you can do ahead of time, and you can have a good plan. You get to the track the day of, and you just sometimes you see a horse in the paddock too, and that can give you either good or bad feelings depending on how a horse is looking in post parade, looking on the paddock. So you just never know.
Yeah, it's
Uh,
calling audibles is definitely a thing that handicappers do. I usually do it more when I'm at the track rather than at
yeah.
home, because you get to see everything and there's a little bit of a feel to it. So,
Yeah.
you just gotta trust your instincts and stick with your decisions.
Yep. No, absolutely. Trust the process. I'm a Philadelphia
Mm.
76ers fan. That's what you got to do. So,
Not if you're Ben Simmons, you don't.
no. Well, it's funny you mentioned that because I was just going to transition and say that I have a huge affinity for handicapping juvenile races. And I joke with my dad that the reason for that is because I was raised a Philadelphia sports fan. And I always have a wait until next year mentality. Because things never work out very well in the year that you're focused on. So
Yeah.
I've developed this kind of unhealthy obsession with evaluating kind of minor league talent and the NFL draft and NBA draft and all this stuff. And it's true in horse racing too that I'm always excited for the next big thing, looking at the juvenile races and seeing kind of who's up and coming in the sport. And with that in mind, the Maryland Million Day has two specific juvenile races: the Lassie's Stakes for the fillies and the Nursery Stakes for the boys. And before we move on to handicapping the two big races, I just wanted to see if you had any thoughts for those two juvenile races, either the Lassie Stakes or the Nursery Stakes, and kind of how you may see those two playing out a little bit.
Well, I'll start with the Lassie since I think that's the
Yeah.
first one on the card. It's the
Yeah.
third race.
Yeah.
So it's a really tough race. I mean, these are all young horses. They've all run fast, and they all beat the competition. They're already ahead of kind of set themselves apart a little bit from the rest of the herd, so to speak. Um, so it's always tough because you never know how they're going to react when they're facing better horses. Just like in anything like sports, you never know what you're going to do until you actually go against the tougher competition.
Mhm.
Um, so these races are always wide open. It's very tough, and you kind of have to do your best to try to map out what the race is going to look like. And the way I saw this race, the Lassie, is it looked like there's going to be quite a bit of speed here.
Mhm.
The horse Sparkle Sprinkle looks very, very fast. Even though the last race back in October 3rd
Mhm.
kind of got bumped a little bit, didn't get out in front and kind of quit on him. But I still think that horse is pretty quick here. It might be the quickest of the quick. And you have a horse like Buff My Boots, kind of the same thing, but tends to kind of quit later against a little bit better competition.
Mhm.
So another horse, Waterworks, has a ton of speed early. Even though that horse had went longer, I still think they're going to try to go and force the hand. So that left me with two options here. The two horse, Luna Bell, who's shown the propensity to pass horses, which is very good for young horses. So that horse kind of caught my eye, even though she's only basically won a maiden race, but it was a pretty good win at Colonial. Kind of
Mhm.
extended her lead and kind of ran off 1 by 6. And then it's the horse that I ultimately landed on was 7. Same
Mhm.
sort of thing, but ran a lot better second time out. Won at Colonial on sloppy track, which you kind of don't know what you're going to get the next time they come out. This horse ran very, very well and was actually behind that horse Sparkle Sprinkle,
Mhm.
who kind of just got an easy lead and just kind of thumped him. And Sweet Gracie didn't really have a bad trip, just could have used some pace pressure on that horse that day, and ran on pretty good. So I think Sweet Gracie has a good chance. 8-1 morning line. I'm not into betting favorites at all, so that's where I'm going to land on that race.
Yeah. No, it's funny. You and I have a lot of the similar horses. I also really like Sparkle Sprinkle. I think that last time out wasn't great for her, but she came back with a really sharp workout last week, and did kind of a minute and two, I think,
Hmm.
on 5 furlongs. So looked really good. Seemed like it just she's still responding well. Got an extra week off, so it was, because I think that was maybe part of the issue too. That was she only had 2 weeks between that last race, and so it's certainly something to keep in mind. Luna Bell's one I really like. I was actually there at when she won her maiden, and a good horse. I agree with you. Has a propensity for passing horses, and the one thing I'll say is that's a horse I'm going to keep my eye on because I'll be there on Saturday. That's
Oh,
a horse I'm going
nice.
to keep my eye on because she had a lot of issues and was really worked up the last time out. And I think that kind of contributed to why she didn't. And I think it cost her because she just got so worked up before she even got into the starting gate that it just didn't work out. So I'm going to be interested to see how they warm her up and how they load her in. So,
Yeah, it's funny you
but
say, you commented about that because the comment in the Brisnet past performance that says unruly. So that kind of tells you all you need to know.
yeah, no, and I saw that a video of it, and I was like, yeah, that's very quite
Yeah,
unruly, yes. And so, so we'll see. Like, I mean, that's one you never know. I have Lunabelle to win. I have Waterworks to place, and I have Sparkle Sprinkle to show. But yeah, I like Sweet Gracie, and then the horse that it's weird. I'm kind of intrigued by the 10 horse, which I believe is Moonbase, and or Moon Boss. I'm sorry, the 9 horse,
yes.
and which is I'm not sure why they're running the horse in this space because this horse looked like it was progressing nicely on turf and now it's switching over to dirt. And so I'm not going to bet on the horse, but I'm going to be very intrigued. I'm just going to try to keep track of how it performs.
Yeah, I took a second look at that horse, but the thing that kind of deterred me away from her was the starts. The two
Yeah.
races she's had, she hasn't really got out of the gate, which is probably why she was on the turf to begin with. If they got that solved, I mean, she has enough talent for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's one, yeah, just keep in the back pocket and maybe think about. So when relating to the nursery, so that's the 8th race in the card, the Maryland Million Nursery Stakes, and this is for the boys. I was just curious if you had some potential thoughts on that race and kind of where you landed up, because I think that this is a race where I can see some long shots really hitting the board.
Oh, I mean, as far as thoughts, I got thoughts on everything. Whether anybody wants to hear them or not, that's another story. But
I'm all ears, Barry. I'm all ears.
yeah, this is another one. It's almost, obviously it's the identical race for the boys.
Mhm.
But there's some more form here to go on with a lot of these horses. They've had more starts, so it's a little
Mhm.
bit easier in that sense, where you get a little bit of not so much form because these young horses they improve and fall off as the wind blows sometimes. Um,
Yeah.
so I kind of eliminated the first 3 horses. I mean, the one horse does look a little interesting, Buffalo, um, but I'm not really sure how to take these horses coming in from Monmouth and what they're
Mhm.
going to do. I
Mhm.
mean, he broke his maiden at Monmouth, and then at Pimlico, then went to Monmouth and ran in a stake there, a pretty good one, didn't do very much, and I don't know, whether it's the kind of whip rule that they have there where they're not able to encourage the horses
True.
or something that you never know what you're going to get. So he's definitely
Yeah.
on the radar, but I just went elsewhere, and the
Mhm.
horse that I looked at second was Locomotive,
Mhm.
and I again another one coming from Monmouth, but this horse has ran pretty good in every start except for the one at Timonium, where it looks like maybe it got hurt. I don't know, because he came back awfully quick, like a month later. He was
Mhm.
pulled off Van Doff at Timonium in their juvenile stake as the favorite
Yeah.
at 90 cents on the dollar. So this horse clearly has talent. Came back, ran okay at Monmouth, in the smoke lacking, but I'm treading lightly there.
Mm-hmm.
I was very fond of his dad, Divining Rod. I thought that horse was pretty good back in the day. But I ended up with Mr. Mox, the 10 horse. I thought this horse is going to get the absolute best trip possible, especially coming off the mile effort. I think this horse is going to sit off the pace, right off the leaders, and stalk and pounce, get first run, and hopefully can just extend that lead.
Yep. Yep. So no, that's Mr. Mox was definitely on my radar. The two other horses that I was kind of taking a look at was Bet on Bits, which is the 10th horse, and that was a horse that I thought. It's only run once. It was a very it was lower level maiden, but it was at Laurel, and one going away with a lot of ease. I also Divining Rod also sired Bet on Bits, and I just think you might see some progression between race 1 and race 2. At least sometimes you hope to see that. Some horses do,
Sure.
some horses don't. But at 12-1, I like the price. And then the other one was Shady Muni, I should say. Another horse that showed kind of improvement, went from Monmouth to Laurel, and ran okay at Monmouth in the maiden, but then really came back and won pretty well at Laurel and had some nice workouts. And so that was another horse, I think, at 12-1 that, again, just was interesting to me. I will say the horse that, if you're playing Stable Duel, I would not encourage you to play this horse, but Gallant Gold is really interesting, the 3 horse, because that horse just has terrible trips. And just the first 3 times out, that horse has been bumped or out slow, or just has had all sorts of issues. I think the rider lost his irons the second to last time out. So it's just always run into issues. Finally, last time out, actually had a good trip and won. And so, I don't know. At 20-1, it might be worth a little bit of a look, but ultimately, I also ended up on Mr. Mox as my favorite, but I had because I agree with you entirely, and Jamie Ness, also the trainer. Anybody who follows Parks,
lights out,
has been lights out at Parks. Exactly. I think he's doubled up the next closest trainer there, so for wins. So that's where I ended up. But I had Bet on Bits and Shady Muni underneath to place and show. So
the interesting long shot. You're talking about Stable Duel. A horse, if you're in a Stable Duel situation, and you like a horse earlier in the card, that you want to kind of spend up for, that's a favorite, and you have some bullets left, but you don't want to use a favorite here. The horse, the 8, All for Love, was one that caught my eye. That horse has run pretty good every single time out, just hasn't really won.
Yep.
And I think that horse will be around. I don't know if the horse will actually be 20-1. But I think that horse can kind of run past horses at the end and kind of give you maybe get a nice second or third place finish.
Yep. No, that's great advice. I mean, so many times with Stable Duel, especially when you don't have much left, you're looking,
right.
That 3,000 to 1,000 to 3,000 slot. You're looking at where up on the board consistently,
right. Exactly.
and they're not going to kill you. So, no, great advice there. So let's transition to the 2 big races, the Maryland Million Ladies Stakes first. And let me just run through the field very quickly for the folks listening at home. And it is a 13-horse field, and it's a 1 1/8 on turf for 3-year-olds and up. Fillies and mares, obviously. In the number 1 post position, you have Holly's Lady going off at 20-1, then Breviary going off at 30-1, Maldives Model going off at 6-1, Epic Idea at 8-1, Tipsy Chatter in the 5 spot going off at 20-1, Artful Splatter going off at 12-1, Misty's Banshee going off at 10-1. In the 8th hole, you have Morning Line favorite I Love You going off at 5-2. And then in the 9 hole, Sally's Mustang going off at 12-1. Fool Yourself going off at 10-1. Amplio Esquima going off at 15-1. And then in the 12 hole, you have Judy Blue Eyes going off at 5-1. And finally, in the 13th and final slot, you have Brushing going off at 12-1. So this is a large field. And with this large of a field, there's a lot of places to go. So I'm curious, Barry, where you decided to go or where you were looking for this particular race.
Yeah, this race was kind of a doozy because it was a little bit of trickery because I didn't really, at first glance, just like, you go through the PPs and you take a look. At first glance, the horse I Love You looks very,
Mhm.
very strong,
Mhm.
especially off the last four. The
Yep.
horse is usually first, second, or third, at least in the PPs that I'm looking at, in every
Yep.
race, but only has 3 wins. And obviously, this is a field that she can handle. She's a 5-year-old mare. She's a pro. But I don't know. It's tough to maintain that kind of form for a long time. Not that I'm saying that she's just not going to run. She has
Mhm.
every right to win this race as anybody. I mean, her last race, she came from the clouds, from way downtown. Like
She
she was
did. Yeah.
16 lengths back and ended up winning by 7. I mean, that
Yeah.
is in itself should tell you a lot. This horse is obviously just very good at the time. Right now is in
Yeah.
very, very good form. But I'm willing to bet against that. I think they really might lay into this horse
Yeah.
on Saturday, and I don't want to be there, at a short price when this horse doesn't win. I try to avoid that. Now, it seems like that kind of situation is coming up. You have a horse just inside of that one, the 9 Sally's Mustang that hasn't really run a bad race either, but doesn't
Mhm.
seem like she's ready to make the jump. So I ended up on the 10. Fool yourself. I
Okay.
thought the effort after the claim, or actually after the layoff, so back in November 29th of last year, the horse got laid off for a little while and didn't come back until May of this year. And she fired a pretty good shot as a 3-year-old, coming back after a weak effort at Aqueduct. And I think it was probably a surprise because they put the horse in for $25,000 that day and got claimed. Then the horse rips off and goes up a level to 40,000, wins, breaks the maiden at $40,000. Um, Comes back, optional claimer 32, wins.
Mhm.
Same level, comes back, wins. Then dips down at Timonium and goes on the dirt at a mile and wins.
Mhm.
I think that that was a really astute claim here, and they know what they have. The last time ran on the dirt, which I don't think this horse is really a dirt horse. I think out of Mosler, AP Indy, I think this horse is really geared for the turf, and switching back off that kind of mediocre, kind of ran around the track sort of effort, even as the favorite. I still think this horse has a lot of potential here, and that's who I ended up on.
Yeah, that Fool Yourself definitely caught my eye and was I also like that move back to turf, obviously. I think that'll be successful and yeah, it certainly has had a very, very good 2021. Um, I'm with you on that. I think I Love You is going to get. I just don't know about that horse. I think, like you said, I think that's going to be. I don't want betting on that horse. Also, I'm not entirely sure. I mean, this is the other thing to point out is a lot of these horses have not gone a mile and an eighth now on the 16th, but you never know how that is going to,
Oh yeah.
is going to affect a horse. And excuse me. So, particularly for the horses who may be out in front, you're just not sure they're going to be able to hold on. The horses that typically are, late runners, are they going to have enough speed to catch up with everyone? So, a lot of unknowns there. I did take a look. I also looked at Misty's Banshee. Was a horse that I looked at, which is a Brittany Russell horse, and Brittany Russell at Laurel. She's one of the local trainers. She kind of runs in the DMV area. And so she also has a lot of horses down at Colonial and that I'll kind of see regularly. And this is a horse that made a huge jump last time out on a sloppy surface. And this was a horse that was supposed to run on turf, got taken off. It was a muddy track, ran a really big buyer's number and won with ease. It's a horse that does tend to have actually pretty decent turf pedigree and should be able to handle the distance. Now that said, it's a step up. but I kind of like the shot there. So that's a horse that I certainly had my eye on. And then I also, much like you, was taking a look at some of the other ones, like Sally's Mustang, and also taking a look at Fool Yourself. I will say what was one of the other horses that I was going to mention? Oh, Epic Idea. That's a horse going off at 8-1. A horse won last year's Maryland A Million Ladies.
Yeah.
That's an interesting horse in that if you look at the past performances, it is largely a sprint horse. And yet it will occasionally step up to these mile plus races and do well. And that's kind of fascinating to me. This is a horse that doesn't seem like it's necessarily had the 2021 that it had in 2020. You know, it's regressed a little bit this year. It is improving a little bit. I still don't love it, but you know, you can never discount last year's winner. I think there is something to be said for that. But ultimately, I ended up on Misty's Banshee to win. I have I Love You underneath as a show, and then I do have Fool Yourself to place. So that's kind of how I see that race playing out. But it's going to be interesting with 13 horses. You just never know, and you know the race could really be decided by the break. And like I said, just don't know how it's going to all play out. So let's move to the Classic. And again, I want to run through the field. This is a slightly smaller field with 8 horses entered. And in the number 1 position, you have Dashing Lou going off at 30-1, Prindimi going off at 12-1, Torch of Truth at 4-1, Crouchelli going off at 10-1. In the number 5 slot, you have Ain't to Beer Cold going off at 20-1, and then Dream Big Dreams at 4-1. The Poser at 6-1, and then finally in the 8th spot, you have Tappin' Cat going off at 6-5. And this is, of course, another 1.125 miles on dirt for 3-year-olds and up. And so, Barry, my question for this one is, will anyone beat Tappin' Cat in this race?
Because I really don't understand Tappin' Cat's past performances. You know, if you go back, you know, from June 14th all the way, not much speed at all. And then the last 3 races just been on the engine and winning. You know, barely winning, but winning. So I'm not so confident in that horse doing this on Saturday. There's a horse that I kind of like at a big price here, and he kind of at least on paper, I don't think he's going to be as big of a price as he is. And it's Ain't to Beer Cold. This horse is his form's a little bit dirtied up. Back between October 24th and December 26th last year, he ran some pretty good races against better company. Concluding at Laurel in the Howard County, just missing. Now, at 1.16 miles going longer. Now, it seems like every time this horse goes long, runs the best race of his career.
Yeah.
And I don't understand why they won't point to races that are this long or maybe even longer or similar races, but they kind of go back and forth between 7 furlongs and a mile. But every time this horse runs long, he's close to the pace. He runs his race and he almost gets there. He's getting a slight break in the weight from a couple of horses, including Tappin' Cat, which I do like. It's not a huge factor, but it's something that can only add to a horse's resume as they come into a race. So I really like this horse here. If I get 20-1, that's great. You're just going to push all the chips in and let it fly. But the other horse that I kind of did like behind that one was Dream Big Dreams.
Yep.
I think this horse is as consistent as they come. Doesn't like to win per se. It doesn't look like, gets right up there and kind of fledgles, but the horse can win on his best day, and it's another Brittany Russell horse. So she's been on fire lately. So I can see this horse firing a big shot also. I just can't trust a horse like Tappin' Cat in a race like this from the outside post. There's a lot of negatives there, including what the price will be. So I'm going to try to throw one downfield and catch a big one.
I love it. I love it. You know, to your point about Tapping Cap barely winning, you know, what I was saying earlier about the distance, you know, this is a horse that has been barely winning at, you know, it's your point that the last three races, this horse went to the lead now and is all of a sudden kind of a pace setter and has held on by the skin of its teeth. And so you add a little bit more distance, and I just worry about that. And I worry that you add that last 16th of a mile, and I think this horse is going to get caught coming down the stretch. And so I also, as good as the horses look the last three, I have a feeling that it's going to get caught near. I also, not surprisingly, like I mentioned in the last one, looked at Dream Big Dreams with Brittany Russell. This is also a horse that seems to really like Laurel Park. 2 wins in 3 races there. And the only time it didn't win, it finished second. So seems to really like the track, despite the fact it's been training at Pimlico. So, but has run at Laurel plenty and has run well there. I also, you know, one of the other horses that I was going to mention was Crouchelli, going off at 10-1. And this was a horse that has had some success at the 1 1/8 distance. Speed is not necessarily elite, but if some of these horses are starting to die coming down the stretch and really struggling, maybe a horse like Crouchelli can pass some of them coming down the stretch. But ultimately, I went with Dream Big Dreams to win. I had Tapping Cap to place, and I had Crouchelli to show. And so that's kind of how I saw it playing out. But this one could go a few different ways. I really like your pick of Ain't to Beer Cold. I think that's a great choice. And that was one where I also noticed the same thing, which was, why are they not running this horse at a mile plus? Just like some days, you know, I admit that I don't know as much as trainers do about horses, but sometimes you look at those past performances and you just go, what are we doing? Why are we running this horse here? It just seems like they're setting the horse up to not do well. So, but yeah, so that's kind of how I see it playing out. So, Barry, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate your time and your expertise on this. This was a lot of fun talking horses with you. And I just want to remind everyone to make sure to check out the Going in Circles podcast to hear more from Barry, and also to make sure to follow him on Twitter at the handle Urban Handicapper. That's Urban without an A, Handicapper. As he mentioned, he's on there all the time. He's a great follow. He engages all the time. I love following him. And you can find a link to both Going in Circles and his Twitter account in the episode notes. And if you're watching this on YouTube, you can get those links right underneath the video. So, Barry, thanks again, and good luck at the track.
All right, appreciate it. Thank you for having me. It was fun.
Well, that's it for today. A big thanks again to Barry for joining me on the show to handicap Laurel Park. I hope you enjoyed that, and I'm going to continue to bring on some different voices in the horse racing community to pick races, because it's great to hear from the perspective of others. Now, remember to tune back on Monday morning. I'll give you what I got right, what I got wrong, and lessons learned from the weekend. Plus, we have a lot of fun episodes planned in preparation for the Breeders' Cup in just a couple of weeks. I actually just got done recording a huge interview with NBC's Donna Brothers. That's right, the former jockey, the now NBC on-track analyst. She joined me for close to an hour, wide-ranging interview about her career as a jockey and now as an analyst. It's really great. She was so kind with her time, told a lot of great stories about Steve Asmussen and Dwayne Lucas and Todd Pletcher and a lot of other big names in the sport. So you definitely want to check that out. And that'll be launching the Monday of Breeders' Cup week. Plus, we're also going to have a top 10 Breeders' Cup moment episode from the last 20 years. We got you covered for all the content you need for the Breeders' Cup for sure. Now, finally, just a quick reminder to follow, download, rate, review, and share the Win Play Show on the podcast platform of your voice. And make sure to subscribe to the Win Play Show on YouTube, in addition to following me on Twitter at the handle @FailedToMenace. And check out amalfimedia.com for my picks for the entire Laurel Park card and all of the great horse racing content you need to get you through the Breeders' Cup and beyond. Until next time, friends, I'm Matthew DeSantis, wishing you a great and prosperous day at the races and reminding you that it's now post time.